Welcome back to Inside City Hall. Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani has vowed to be a leader for all New Yorkers. My next guest wants the mayor-elect to address the specific ongoing displacement of black communities across the 5 boroughs. The city has lost nearly 200,000 black residents from 2020 compared to the year 2000. That's according to the latest census data. It's yet another result of the city's growing affordability crisis, an issue that Mamdani has promised to tackle. The Coalition for a Democratic and Just New York is proposing a bold housing and land use agenda for the Mamdani administration. It's aimed at reversing these trends and prioritizing the needs of black New Yorkers. Joining me now to break it all down is Roger Green, who represented parts of Brooklyn in the State Assembly for 26 years and is now an instructor, I believe, at CUNY at Medgar Evers College. Welcome back to the program. Always good to see you, Professor.
Good to see you, too.
Tell us about this coalition that met to talk about community concerns.
Yeah, I think, well, we really were trying to build on the history of what occurred when David Dinkins was running for office, which was to create a public policy framework in anticipation of his election that would be enacted in terms of local law. And so in this particular case, I think given the crisis that we've seen in New York City, which is driven by economic polarization, which is the driver of an unaffordable city, we felt it was imperative that we present a public policy framework to Mamdani. And of course, one of the anchors of that was to address what I'm hearing from everyone, which is the housing crisis that's currently occurring, which I think, which is basically hollowed out many traditional African-American or African diasporic communities and really represents a form, I think, of pervasive resegregation in many ways.
Okay, now I want to just point out that what you're doing by meeting is something that I've seen you do for decades now, and it harkens back actually to the Black Convention movement. You can go all the way back to the 1840s, and there were black folks sort of like meeting, convening, trying to figure out policy frameworks is what we would call it now, but trying to figure out what do we do next, what happens next. As you all decided to, I looked at your op-ed in Our Time Press where you laid out some of what your conclusions were, and they almost all went to economic concerns, home ownership in particular. Why that?
Yeah, because I think that in order to address this crisis, you also have to deal with the question of generational wealth. How do you secure that? And historically in the United States, one of the abilities to do that is home ownership. And so we think that the creating and enacting local laws that would enhance limited equity co-ops, similar to the traditional Mitchell-Lama type of co-ops and others, would be a step in the right direction. Sometimes those types of initiatives also create startup homes, creating an opportunity for generational wealth for new homeowners. And I think one of the crises that we're facing, when you talk about the 200,000 plus, particularly African Americans or African diasporic people who have left New York City, many of them are young folks who just can't afford to live in our cities at this time.
You and some of your cohorts, who I've been covering now for decades, starting in the 1980s, you put so much money into these communities. The rebuilding of the Franklin Avenue shuttle, which I know cut across your old district.
Yes.
The money that you put into Medgar Evers College, which is in the heart of your district. The amount of economic development money, all of that stuff. It kind of made the area that much more attractive, right? So
absolutely.
To a certain extent, the pressures that we're seeing, that we're now calling unaffordability, are things that, in some ways are a sign of progress.
Yeah, they were, but one of the things that we didn't deal with, I think, and I remember when you, for instance, helped found the credit union. That was in part because there was a concern about the transmission of intergenerational racial inequality. It went back to the formulation of redlining and other issues like that. And so I think, we have invested in a lot of types of institutions that are important and other programs, but at this point in time, I think it's necessary for us to really look at how do you create generational wealth so that we can sustain communities in central Brooklyn and other parts of the city.
You know the political game as well as anybody, and the math is really somewhat unforgiving, right? If you want to talk about home ownership in a city where 3/4 are renters, somebody will win like a Zohran Mamdani by promising a rent freeze. Someone trying to talk about home ownership is, by definition going to be talking to a relatively small group and won't necessarily be able to build the political support for some of the policies you're talking about.
Yeah, that's true. But one of the things, I think a wise man once said, I think it was Albert Einstein, he said, logic gets you from point A to Z, but imagination gets you everywhere. We need a radical imagination in the context of how we're formulating and enacting, adopting legislation, particularly as it relates to housing. This type of crisis necessitates that we not get bogged down in what Dr. King used to call gradualism. And, we need a really radical imagination to address these issues. So community land trusts, I think, are going to be important, limited equity co-ops, and others. Yeah.
Have you gotten any reaction from the Mamdani camp? I know there's a lot of turmoil going on with the transition.
Yeah, we requested a meeting, and we anticipate that we're going to have a meeting in the near future. And at that point, we're going to have a serious discussion about this and other issues that we define as a form of economic democracy for the constituents in our community.
In central Brooklyn, Clinton Hill in particular, I think gave him the biggest majorities anywhere in the city. Even his home district didn't do as much for him.
Clinton Hills, where I live in Fort Greene, absolutely close to 81% of the vote came out for him, which was the highest of any neighborhood in the city. And I think we need to, focus on that. Now, a lot of that came from young folks, even young black folks. 80% of black folks below the age of 40 came out and voted for him. And that's why I think it's imperative that we create a city that's affordable and livable for them.
Okay, a lot of good stuff in this. I recommend that people take a look at it. It's in Our Time Press. On their website, and we'll continue to have this conversation after January 1st. Thanks so much for coming by.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching our YouTube channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, and click the subscribe button right here. You can also download our app or watch us on TV to learn more about the candidates, where they stand on the issues, and more. We'll see you then.